I don't typically gravitate toward films that deal with crime, career criminals, the mob, stuff like that. But from time to time, there are some that can break through that resistance I have, and Crime 101 is one of those films. I went into Crime 101 feeling a bit unsure as to how this film would land with me, and I say that primarily because shortly before I saw Crime 101, I saw How to Make a Killing, which was Regal's Mystery Monday movie, I think February 16th. And I saw Crime 101 the following Friday, I think. So it was pretty close together. I went into How to Make a Killing with the suspicion that I probably wasn't going to enjoy it. It's not a film I would have chosen to watch on my own. There were things about it that were good, that I could recognize that were good, but the overall story was just a total miss for me, and it was not the best viewing experience, let's just say. When I went into Crime 101, I wondered if I was going to have the same feeling. I did voluntarily choose to go see this because I had been interested in it, and I wondered if it would land for me in a similar way that, let's say, the movie The Gentleman did, which is about organized crime, or the show Dexter, which is about a serial killer. Not a likely hero, right? However, those two examples are situations where the characters, despite doing very bad things, they had redeeming qualities about them. And it feels really weird to look at this and understand this. The difference between them and How to Make a Killing, that character had no redeeming qualities for me. And I was trying to think to myself, why is it that Crime 101 landed for me, How to Make a Killing did not? Well, for one thing, in How to Make a Killing, Glenn Powell's character is killing people ahead of him in the inheritance line. It's a completely predatory, very manipulative, greedy sort of approach that he's taking to those in his way. In Crime 101, Chris Hemsworth plays a very skilled jewel thief, let's just say. This is a movie that is directed by Bart Layton. He also did the screenplay, but the movie is based on a short story by Don Winslow. And Chris Hemsworth, as I've already mentioned, he is a jewel thief and he works for Nick Nolte. So he's not necessarily an independent type of person, and you find out as the story goes on about his backstory and what led him to doing these things that he's doing and being caught up with people that aren't the best. And so his character at the beginning of the film, you see him carrying off a heist and you see a very close call happening. And he starts to come to the realization that this is not a life that he wants anymore. But there is one other job that pulls him back in, that sort of situation. One last job before he walks away from a life of crime forever. And then you've got Mark Ruffalo, who is playing this grizzled, frumpy detective with a terrible closure rate on crimes, who feels like he has spotted a pattern with these robberies that have been taking place, and his fellow cops are kind of poo-pooing him and everything. And so you got that storyline, thief trying to get away from the life of crime. That's another thing. He was actually trying to not be bad anymore. Okay? And he had a code. He refused to hurt anybody. He did carry a gun. He would threaten them, but he never committed violence on his victims. So, you do have this very clear distinction between a character like Powell's character in How to Make a Killing and a character like Hemsworth's in Crime 101. Halle Berry plays in here as like an insurance agent, and she gets caught up in the stuff that Hemsworth is involved in. She also is caught up in Ruffalo's investigation, and I'm not going to get into detail about how all of those intricacies work. I really appreciated how all the different storylines intersected, and felt that even though this was a movie that was well over 2 hours long, it didn't feel like it was over 2 hours long. I was thoroughly engaged the entire time. Didn't check my watch once. So that was definitely a plus in this film's favor. It was paced very well. It captivated my attention. The characters were fleshed out so much more than the ones in the other movie. And I keep hearkening back to How to Make a Killing because of the close proximity in which I saw both of these films that are about bad people. In the case of Hemsworth's character, a very morally gray person, but not necessarily, let's say, a killer like Powell's character was. What he was doing was crossing a very strict and clear line for me. The killing of people for personal gain because he wanted this money. I just had a huge problem with that. Not that I didn't have a problem with Hemsworth's character stealing things that didn't belong to him. I cannot stand thieves. They piss me off. But he was written in such a way that his character was interesting and you were kind of drawn into his situation and hoping that he could get himself on the straight and narrow, which is what he is attempting to do. All of the characters in here, with the exception of maybe 2, are morally gray and complex, and they do things that are really great or good, but you can understand their motivations and you sympathize with them to an extent. The 2 characters who are pretty black and white are Barry Keoghan's character. He's a baddie who is like a foil in Hemsworth's plans throughout the movie, though he does show moments of reluctance to do certain things, yet he's really not all that morally gray. I mean, he's a pretty bad dude. The other person who is not morally gray is Monica Barbaro's character, who plays Hemsworth's love interest. And she's kind of in there to sort of help humanize him. I think her introduction into his life is probably something that plays a part in him trying to break away from the things that he's doing. So I really liked how all of the characters in here were written, and I liked their interactions with each other. I liked watching how their lives intersected at various moments, and also interesting little things that the director would do with the characters. Like at one point you've got Halle Berry driving down the street, completely oblivious to the fact that behind her, Chris and Barry's character are having a crazy car and motorcycle chase. And how also earlier in the movie, you would see like their cars passing by each other or something on the road. And I thought that was kind of an interesting touch. Besides the story, there are other things that I liked about this. And one was the way certain shots were framed and filmed. There were a couple of instances where the camera was on the door, and so your perspective changed depending on whether the door was opened or closed. I thought that was just a unique way to show what's going on. It's something we've seen before, but still it jumps out at you because it's not commonly used. I think it would be annoying if it were commonly used. Other things I liked, in addition to the shades of gray that almost all of the characters display at some point in this film, also you've got demonstrations of cops bending the rules, breaking the rules blatantly. There are also other moments, or at least one other moment that I can think of off the top of my head, that are realistically done, and I appreciated that. And I'll give you an example. There's a shootout. You know how a lot of times in movies, when a person is shot, they fly backward in a dramatic manner, just like, you know, halfway across the street or whatever. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but like if you saw Hard Boiled, that's not an exaggeration. That's the way they acted when they got shot. It was so ridiculous, but I digress. In here, when someone got shot, they just fell. That's pretty much exactly what happens when someone is shot. They just collapse. They're just down. There's no throwing themselves backwards. They're just flat. I noticed that immediately when it happened, and that was another thing. Like just these touches of realism, right? In the things that are happening, I really liked that. So it was just nice to see how all of these things came together and gave us this, in my opinion, very well-rounded story with fleshed out and interesting characters, complex motivations for some of the behaviors that they had, but motivations that you could understand to a certain degree. Good acting. I thought the acting in here was fine. It was interesting to see Hemsworth playing someone who was not self-assured. There are scenes where he's with Monica Barbaro's character and he acts like he just does not know at all how to connect to her on a romantic level. He's so lacking in confidence when it comes to women. And it was weird to see him playing that type of character. I mentioned in the live streams, like, dude, have you not looked in a mirror? Obviously, I'm oversimplifying it, but still, it was an interesting contrast to see him playing someone like that. But yeah, as a whole, I thought this was a very well done film, competently made, well acted, paced in such a way that I was not really aware or thinking about how long it was taking to get from beginning to the end. So I really appreciated all of those different aspects to this film. There are some things that stuck out to me as mildly problematic, which has to do with the story in general. There were some things that Hemsworth's character did that seemed to be a complete contrast to the way you had seen him operating up until certain moments. You see how careful he is about DNA, but then there's a moment where he takes his mask off inside a car. He takes his gloves off and he's exiting the vehicle with his mask off, with his gloves off, and that obviously is something that's going to lead to certain things being discovered, but it really stood out to me, especially since it happened not long after we had seen how careful he was with things like DNA and hair and fibers and stuff like that. There's also a moment where Barry's character behaves in a way that's just is weird, like they're engaged in this chase, and there's a moment where he has total opportunity to get away, but he hangs around waiting for Chris's character to chase him. I thought maybe I understood, okay, he's just playing because he just likes to mess with people. But it still didn't make any sense, because why would he hang around hoping that this guy might potentially catch him if he had plans to disrupt what was going to be happening in the future? It was a weird character behavior that didn't make any sense to me. And finally, probably one of the biggest things that would land in the category for me is that the ending felt a bit pat. It was morally interesting, but I'm not quite sure how well it will land with everyone. I can't say I disliked it. I'm just not sure about it. And maybe you'll know what I'm talking about when or if ever you get around to watching this film. But other than that, I really don't have major problems with this film. I liked that it gave us complex, flawed characters that are written well. I liked the way it was filmed, acted, all those other things that I've already mentioned. And I'm glad I took the time to check it out. It was definitely worth a watch. Don't regret taking the time to see it. Glad I saw it on the big screen. And so it's a definite recommend from me, especially if you enjoy movies like this. So that's all I have to say for now about Crime 101. If you guys get a chance to check it out, let me know what you think. It's still in theaters as of now. Who knows how long it will stay there. It'll be on digital pretty soon, I'm sure. All right, you guys, that's it for now. Bye.